These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. My dog might have just saved my life. For context, I live in suburban downtown Orlando. You can easily figure that out by my comment history. No kids, 2 pets, and few stray animals, squirrels, possums, cats, etc., but nothing to be afraid of. Until about a week ago. The property next door is under renovation, and literally the day they began deconstruction, my wife, my cat, Balaker, my dog, Hammock, and I all felt a weird disturbance. I'll go into detail at the end, but suffice to say it's unnatural and intentionally keeping us awake. My wife and I have opposite schedules, and, as I'll refer to it going forward because that's as vague a word I can find, knows when one comes and one goes. It makes its presence known as soon as one of us leaves the house or falls asleep. My schedule is less predictable, so I get the brunt of it. We'll get knocks on the door or a random series of calls/texts from an unknown number at uncanny similar times, then at random ones that make no sense. Answering has proven a waste of time, as it always gives us a dial tone. In 2025, a dial tone. I digress. Hard to chalk it all up to coincidence. My wife was recently sent an image, as she was falling asleep, of what appeared to be a spider's nest opening. Her ultimate fear. It was 30 minutes after I left for work yesterday. That night, while she was at work and I drifted off on the couch, I received a video of the OceanGate sub imploding, despite video not existing, about 5 to 10 minutes after my wife left for work this morning. That one left me jarred. Somebody/thing knows our deepest fears and is using them against us. I don't think it is human. My dog loves everyone and everything, to a fault sometimes. He is not like whatever is coming from next door and knocking on ours. It is so random and sporadic, but the voice is always the same. Weird, almost dial-up sounding. 2 knocks at the door. Rap, then humming a tune I don't recognize. I'll try to get audio next time. 1 quick. Anyone in there awake and alive? Was enough to terrify me in that strange, artificial-sounding voice. We're all huddled in the only room that does not have windows, my dog's paw in one of mine, and a Moss 590 slug, mind you, in the other, clinching both and keeping eyes on Hammock. He's been quiet, but whatever is outside knows that he exists, by name, and he's aware of its presence as well. The hair on his back is as raised as I've ever seen, and I know the size of his teeth, 40 pounds hound mix, but I've never once seen him use them the way he was. We heard glass shattering in the bathroom, and then the back bedroom. Following that was a strange groaning noise, not the same you or I would make after climbing through broken glass. Again, that weird dial-up tone, and then a gentle knock at the bedroom door. Hello, here to help. Nope, I said silently to myself with conviction and calming affirmation. We'll just sit here quietly. Categories. The dog has other plans. He burst the door open, and all I saw was 1 spurt of blood before I passed out. The noise alone was too much to bear. The rest is secondhand, as I was told. There is no evidence that anyone broke into my house. I have a terrible gash on my forearm. There was a kitchen knife and an old telephone unplugged in the closet with us, and apparently I forgot to load the shotgun. My wife thinks I'm crazy, awaiting DNA tests, but 2 detectives think the blood is mine. Hammock disappeared for a few hours and came back with a severed human hand in his mouth, as one does, and the fingerprint on it matches someone I know personally. This someone is, and has been very jealous of my wife and I's relationship from the beginning. I can wrap my head around some of it, but there are details I just can't put together to make any sense. Both pets are okay. My wife and I, who have a better understanding of what is going on, and are scared for our lives. She still doesn't believe all of the details of what I just went through. Just heard a pounding at the front door as I was finishing this. We'll report back. I already bought plane tickets for tomorrow morning and have somewhere else to stay tonight if I have to. Story 2. Something is hunting me down, but no one believes me. The shadows move. I've been seeing them thicken and thin and take shape since I was a toddler. My parents always called me peculiar, in the sense of they didn't believe me. First it was that I needed glasses or I had some sort of mental illness, but all the exams came back negative. On paper, I supposedly have hyperphantasia, even though I clearly failed that test too. I think that's the most frustrating thing about my current situation. I can clearly see what is definitely something from another realm casually roam around the house. I wouldn't complain if it was just one shadow. Instead, I will turn my head and see a few dozens of critters as dark as the night sky and completely immaterial staring at me from corners, the ceiling, or even behind a family member. I'm not afraid of them, or at least I wasn't until a few days ago. You see, after almost 2 decades of inhuman eyes, I doubt they even qualify as eyes. Following you, you start recognizing faces and, dare I say, intentions. For example, there's this one shadow who passed through my bedroom door every night for 3 years when I was a teen. He was one of the most tightly stitched together shadows I've seen. His body was lean and mostly human-like, except his head was deer-shaped, twice the size, and with 2 large antlers poking from it. He didn't really do anything, just kind of checked up on me. Then, one night, I had a dream of being chased. I don't remember by who or what, but in that dream the deer man stepped in, and after I woke up, I never saw him again. The above doesn't mean the shadows are good per se. Not at all. There are heads moving in my peripheral vision at all times, tendrils and tentacles of dark goo run up the stairs in broad daylight, and something like a cat-goat hybrid hanging upside down from the ceiling right above my bed for the past 1.5 years. And I'm just waiting for it to fall on me. I'm positive it will. It's been maybe a week since that stupid thing has stopped vanishing. It has a bull-like head, only there are no horns or a nose. Instead, the only thing decorating its face aside from its eyes is a crescent smile at all times. I would call it long lungs, but even that's an understatement. Its 4 limbs are noodle-like, and it runs how a dog would, only at the speed of a cheetah in its prime, ready to pounce on the prey. In that case, me, it constantly runs up the stairs, no matter the time of day. It constantly peeks inside my bedroom from the hall, either standing on its back legs and leaning to the side, or on all 4s and tilting its head like badly made animation. It's so active, I haven't seen another critter since it's appeared. The breaking point has come up in the past 5 hours. I had gone on a date with my best friend, Souza, and while she dropped me off at home, she squeezed my hand tightly. Souza is peculiar like me. With both of us being half ostracized from a young age, we found solace in each other. She, essentially, predicts life-altering events, usually involving hospitals or death. Back to what happened. She grabbed my hand and made me swear not to leave my room at all once I entered. Safe to say, I grabbed the salt from the kitchen and a cross on my way up. Don't ask me about religion. With the things I've seen, I refuse to discuss with anyone but God. For these past 4 hours, everything been smooth sailing. Then, my brother settled on his bed opposite of mine. We share the room, and the hallway lamps went off. My sense of logic screamed to close the door, but instead I grabbed a flashlight, and I saw it. Long Legs had passed the doorframe and was standing on its hind legs, staring directly at me. I could finally see everything about it, really. Its height, its anatomy, each and every thought it could form behind that never-ceasing smile. A lump was rising in my throat, and fast. But I couldn't move. The salt, the cross, and knife I've always had on my desk were only a few feet away. But I was frozen. I just stood there and stared at it, and it did the same. The half hour my clock said we stood there, at arm's reach of each other, didn't feel so short. I would swear it was hours, maybe even days, and the sun just hadn't risen. I wouldn't put time manipulation past its capabilities. When it finally left, it stepped back and disappeared down the hallway. I just started crying right then and there, dropping the flashlight before shutting the door. I'm currently backed up against the door writing this. The internet is timeless, and even if something happened to me, someone will know. It hasn't left. I can feel it around somewhere. Story 3. My boyfriend came back to me after his funeral. I just wanted to see my boyfriend one more time. I miss him so much. When a physical body dies, the soul doesn't go straight to heaven or wherever it's meant to go. It lingers for a while. But when a body receives its final blessing in the church, the spirit stays for just a little bit longer, and then it moves on. I know this because I live in the church as the sacristan. I see the ghosts or spirits of the dead at night when the church is quiet. Sometimes they even talk. They're confused, lost. But when they see the light, the invitation, I think they're gone, like sparkling dust scattered in the wind. I've lived in the church for a year now. The priest told me to stay here for protection and help with the daily activities. My father wants me dead, but he can't touch me as long as I'm under the priest's care. The priest told me, everyone deserves to feel safe. And I believe him. I am safe in the church. My father wants to hurt me, physically. He says I brought shame to the family. He caught Miguel and I kissing in my bedroom. Miguel was my best friend. We have been hiding our relationship since we were kids. We were the only boys in town, no girls around, and somehow, I just fell in love with him. My father threw me out the moment he saw us. Told me never to come back. Word spread fast. Everyone in town knew. My father, already a drunk, spiraled even more. He got wasted every night and started causing chaos. People said he'd go around shouting that he'd kill both me and Miguel. Miguel died a few days later. A tragic accident, they said. Someone hit his motorcycle during the night. No witnesses. The police came to the church and told me the details. It was brutal. They said he wouldn't have survived. His helmet was split in half. One side of his face was still inside the other half of the helmet. The motorcycle was unrecognizable and on fire when they found it. They also asked if I'd seen my father. Said they just wanted to talk to him. I told them I'd never speak to that man again. But if I saw him, I let them know. Miguel's body was blessed in the church on the day of his burial. I was the only person there, aside from the priest. I stayed in the church after the service. I knew he might show up at night. Spirits often do. He showed up, but not like the others. He didn't appear inside the church. He stood outside, calling my name. He wore the same suit he was buried in, with the bow tie I gave him on his 19th birthday. He said he missed me, missed my hugs, my kisses. I'd never touched a spirit before. I only spoke to them, but I missed him so much. I stepped outside. Every step I took toward him, the colder it got. Goosebumps ran up my arms. The hairs on my neck stood up. He hugged me. I hugged him back. He felt like ice. He smelled like rotting flesh. But I didn't care. Then, as I pulled away, he grabbed my face. His face changed. It wasn't Miguel. It was a demon. Its mouth stretched wide, grinning from ear to ear, revealing rows of rotting teeth. Its eyes were like a goat's, yellow, twisted, and wrong. I froze. I couldn't move. His hand wrapped around my neck, choking me. I couldn't speak, couldn't hear. Everything was black, just me and him floating in nothingness. I was suffocating, twitching, dying. Then he released me. I heard the priest's voice. A Latin prayer I couldn't understand. I fell to the ground. The priest stood between us, holding a crucifix, shielding me. The demon backed away, slowly, still grinning. Then it vanished just like that. The priest dragged me back inside, told me never to speak of it again. A year has passed. I still live in the church. I haven't seen Miguel since, but I still hope every night. Then one night, while I was closing the doors, I saw someone sitting in the last pew. It was my father, not alive, a spirit. He was sobbing when I approached, wearing a hospital gown. I sat in the pew in front of him. He spoke to me, said he didn't kill Miguel, didn't know who did, said he died of a heart attack from drinking too much. He said he was sorry, that he loved me, and then a light appeared, so bright it filled the whole church. His body turned to sparkling dust, and just like that, he was gone. Story 4. The zombie that follows me. Hey, there's something that's been bothering me, and you're the only one I feel like listening to, even though you only respond when it involves my new girlfriend. Anyways, about a week now, I can't seem to walk to work without this guy bumping into me. Just an ordinary suit and tie business guy. And see what I did there? He acts like he's on the Bluetooth headset adorning his stupid ear, talking to some entity on the other end of the line, but I swear his eyes don't break contact until he runs into me. Every day is something new, a bagel splattered in my shirt, a coffee that can't drift away from my pants, or a casual shoulder check. Am I crazy? Is he trying to get a rise out of me? I asked Sarah about it, and she just thinks it's my chest that stands out like when we go out to the bar and every guy hound me like a puppy wanting a treat. That doesn't explain the piercing eyes that stare into my soul as he casually finds a way to ruin my short commute. Today it was different. He stared at the ground, as if some kind of guilt was consuming him. No headset, no suit, just another cisgendered white dude taking up the sidewalk. I felt bad and stopped him. He murmured a plethora of words that didn't make sense except the part where he finally said sorry, but it was more like he was just sorry for existing in that moment. I said thanks and headed to the brew house like any other day, thinking that was the end of it. Fast forward to the middle of my shift, the dude stumbled through the door. Sarah might have been onto something. This dude walks up to the counter and is just staring at me as if I was a rack of ribs at a barbecue eating contest. I didn't notice it before, so maybe I was overthinking. He ordered a coffee and bagel breakfast, classic, and tipped me some weird coins and sat in a booth that had the slightest view of where I stand behind my safety net of beers and patrons that at least tip big for staring. Walking home, I couldn't help but think about the dude and all the possibilities of why he could have been fired. I flipped his coins listening with my AirPods to the tune of the Backseat Lover until I dropped the damn thing. It rolled down the concrete up to guess who was the same dumb guy. Taking the opportunity of a lifetime, I asked him how he got fired or if he quit. My money was on an HR complaint or something. Like always, he just stared at me, but not my breast or my eyes, just staring hard. I asked again, "Hey, so what are you doing out on the streets?" Shaking his head, he said the most jarring thing. My coworkers wouldn't let me mooch off of them anymore, and I'm the only one left. The only one left? It must have been some small firm if they closed up within the few months of me moving here. I bet he's just another sexual harassment case. Wouldn't you know it, he grabbed for me. Luckily, I've been carrying my pepper spray, and he got a mouthful, eye full, face full. I ran without looking back, taking a few roundabout streets to make sure he couldn't follow me. When I got back to the apartment I share with Sarah, she was standing outside. She kept asking where I was and kept going on and on about me cheating. Just 'cause I did it with her doesn't mean I'd do it again, sorry. The horror in my eyes shut her up quickly. Coming up the other end of the sidewalk was my red-faced victim, looking even more worse for wear. I didn't remember hitting him, but the dude looked worse than the first guy in the 100 versus 1 gorilla match. I tossed his coin towards him, and some sensibility returned to his hyper-focused shuffle. Some businessmen never let go of their money like they say. Sarah, and I ran inside and called the cops. I've just been typing this to you and listening to the slow beating on our door while we wait. Hopefully, they come soon and he won't stop grumbling about how he just needs some more meat. I get it, my body has been a walking object of desire ever since puberty, but this is some next-level freak shit. Sarah has been doubling down about how I'm some sort of a fair heifer. Cow references, yay, it's not like I chose to be born like this. I hope this finds you well, and you feel some sort of relief that my life has been crazy and my new partner has grown suspicious of me, just like you did. Maybe it's karma or something. I still love you, Steph. Story 5. Never swim at Incruena Falls. Everyone did it. Carson, Gare, Leo, and I were all bored to death that summer in our small, sleepy corner of suburbia. The worst day of my life took place just before we went our separate ways. It was late May, right after our high school graduation, and we were all antsy to get the hell out of Hayfield. Now, I would give anything to go back. One afternoon, the four of us were sprawled out on Gare's back porch, sipping cold sodas and yapping on about nothing as we often would on those hot, muggy days when no one felt like moving. It was Carson's idea. "We need to go swimming," she declared suddenly, not lifting her head from my lap. "Chloe, let's take your truck." All the usual conversation topics had been worn out by then. We decided that Leo would make the coolest grandpa, Gare had the most game, I was the best getaway driver, and that we would throw Carson to the zombies first in the event of an apocalypse. So we agreed. It was time to get out. The drive to the falls was baking hot, but it became more bearable once I got the janky AC going and turned up the radio. As we left Hayfield proper, the usual signals didn't carry, so I switched it to some random oldie station and let it play. Gare sang along in his pitchy but charming way. Come on, baby, don't fear the reaper, baby take my hand, until the tune was entirely eaten by static. We all knew Gare played up his lover boy persona to get us laughing. He used to be so shy. At that moment, I was struck by how good it was to see him grab the spotlight. Over those 4 years, we'd all done some growing up in our own ways, I thought. As the song faded in a garbled fuzz, we could hear bits of other signals bleeding through. It was then, clear as day, that a man's voice on the radio said, "Fall." Nothing but static followed. No one mentioned it. Looking back, I'm not sure if anyone else even heard it. I turned the radio off. I think that's when we started playing Truth or Dare. If you chose Dare, Carson explained, you would be given a special mystery dare once we reached the falls. Gare and Leo both chose Dare. I chose the Truth. Have you ever kissed anyone? Carson asked from her place in the passenger seat. I kept my eyes on the road, but I could hear her grinning through the words. I hadn't. I also didn't want to sound like a total virgin. Yeah. Who? I made a sharp turn as the winding rural road bent violently to the left. Gare fell almost all the way onto Leo's lap. The two of them packed into the truck's tiny back seat space. Leo cussed, rubbing his forehead where it had collided with Gare's. They laughed like fools at this. You wouldn't know them, I lied. They already graduated. They? Carson pressed. I'd clearly set myself up for more interrogation. That's what I said. I replied without looking at Carson. I wasn't giving her more ammunition. She let out a dissatisfied huff, but turned her attention to the road instead as it changed from pavement into dirt. We were almost there. That thin dirt road through the woods soon opened up into a small makeshift parking area, which usually turned into a soup of mud in the rainy season. Today was mostly dry. It was also completely empty. This was strange for a typical summer afternoon. The place was secluded, sure, but it was still a hot spot for just about every student and alum of Hayfield High. Sweet, we got the place to ourselves, said Gare, waggling his eyebrows. You know what that means? Gross, Carson said with mock disgust, yanking Gare's baseball cap down over his eyes. Carson and I hopped out onto the dirt first, then shoved the front seats forward to let the guys clamber out. Next, we stripped down to our bathing suits and sprayed every inch of our bodies with bug spray. That was just protocol around here to ward away the constant plague of mosquitoes and horseflies. It was a short hike to the promised land. We picked our way through the dense forest, pushing aside clumps of brambles and wisteria. It looked almost like a tunnel, the way the vines choked the trees and curled into each other above our heads. Bits of Spanish moss hung down from low oak boughs, prickling my skin as I trudged along. The air was thick here, peaty and sweet. As the rushing of the falls grew closer, a hush fell over the four of us, as if these were hallowed grounds. Looking back, I think they were. In Corona Falls. No one knew why they called it that, but everyone agreed that's what it was called. The entrance used to have an informational plaque tacked onto a wooden post, but it had long since fallen down and worn away, taking its history with it. The falls themselves were pretty, but not anything to write home about, just shelves of rock stacked around 20 feet high. Frothy fresh water trickled down into a round swimming hole surrounded by flat boulders that were the ideal size and shape for spreading out towels and picnic blankets. The water was a translucent dark brown. It always reminded me of oversteeped tea. When the trees parted, Gare sprinted past us and took a flying leap into the hole with a whoop, disappearing beneath the surface. Leo took off running after him, executing a perfect cannonball that splashed me, Carson, and our towels. That's it, you're dead. Carson dropped the thing she was carrying and jumped in to exact her vengeance. I was left with our stuff. I soon found a good wide rock jutting out into the water and began unfolding an old blanket as Gare swam over. Last one in is a rotten egg, he said, leaning on the rock with his elbows. And you're getting rotten by the minute, Chloe. I splashed him in the face. As I did, I noticed something. The water felt weirdly warm, like a hot bath. My fingertips tingled. Soon, my entire hand felt numb, like static. I jerked it away. No one else seemed bothered, so all I said was, okay, just give me a minute. I need more bug spray. But as I said this, I noticed something else. I could not see or feel a single insect in the air. Normally, the place was teeming with small clouds of gnats, water bugs, dragonflies, and of course the ever-present mosquitoes and horseflies. It was an entire ecosystem unto itself. Today, the swimming hole was in utter stasis. I don't know what else to say other than that it was deeply wrong. I found myself wondering if we'd taken a wrong turn. It felt so foreign, like a completely different place from the one I'd spent so many summers hanging around. No, the same toppled signpost had been there. I was sure of it. Why was everything so dead? I did notice a few abandoned towels scattered about on the rocks. It was at least comforting to know that people had recently been here. Seeing this, I tried to push the thought from my mind, but I could not bring myself to get into the water just yet. At some point, someone brought up the game again. Carson and I dared Leo to jump from a thick oak branch overhanging the deepest part of the hole. He scrambled up the slick bark without a second thought. Fall! My heart lurched. The voice from the radio played in my head over and over, but Leo kept his balance. He stood straight up on the branch proudly and pointed at us with an exaggerated wink. Then he jumped. I held my breath, waiting for Leo to resurface. We waited for a long, measured moment, and I remember thinking how I'd never forgive myself if something terrible happened. Leo broke the surface with a gasp. He hauled himself out of the water, collapsing onto the rock belly up. He was laughing, but he seemed different. "You good?" I asked. He met my eyes, and for that split second, seemed panicked. I've never seen him so terrified. "Yeah, what a rush," Leo breathed. He stood, turning away from me. "Gare, you're up next, man." Carson dared Gare to climb the falls. Leo seconded this idea. I chose to remain silent. I wish I hadn't. Gare folded his arms and squinted up at the stack of rock. "How far are we talking?" he asked, eyeing the challenge. "All the way. It's okay if you're scared," Carson said with that saccharine smile of hers. "Hell no," Gare said, and began to climb. As he did, I turned to Leo. Again, I asked if he was okay. He shrugged, not taking his eyes off of Gare, who was slowly picking his way up the slimy first shelf of the falls. Leo finally opened his mouth. "I think there are people down there." My stomach churned. I searched his face for some sign of a joke. He looked down at me, stone-faced, as if daring me to call his bluff. "They tried to take me." That's when Gare fell. Carson gave a sort of strangled yelp as our friend missed his foothold and teetered backwards, slipping into empty air. Fall. That word kept repeating in the back of my mind. I swear, it took forever for Gare to hit the water. I can still picture his body floating there in the air, head first with no hope of bracing for impact, Leo screaming his name from the shore. I felt like I should have somehow predicted this outcome, and yet I'd done nothing to stop it. Gare was swallowed up by the black water of Incruna Falls. We waited and waited. He did not resurface. The thing that has always bothered me most about Gare's death is this: they never found a body. I remember hearing that the recovery team dug up nothing but mud from the bottom of that swimming hole. There was no casket at his funeral. Afterwards, Carson, Leo, and I sort of lost touch. It just wasn't the same without Gare. I've been trying to record everything I can remember about that day. Now that a few years have gone by, I feel like I can think about it again without spiraling into depression. Maybe if I finally get it all out, I can put it behind me for good. I recently asked my parents about the whole Gare situation to confirm the details. They had no idea who I was talking about. I've checked the newspaper archives, public records, even drove by his parents' house. It was foreclosed. It doesn't feel like my friend died a violent death. It feels like he never existed. He simply faded away. Looking back on those years, and knowing I can't call up any of those friends today, it feels like we all did. I've tried to get in touch with Carson and Leo again. Neither of them seem to be on social media at all. Nothing comes up in search results when I type their names. All I know is that they don't live in Hayfield anymore. At the risk of sounding too crazy, it's like somehow that Blackwater washed them out of this world too. On a different, happier day at the falls, as the four of us skipped stones and passed around a bottle of cheap wine, Carson posed a question. "What does Incrona mean anyway?" she'd asked idly, taking a long swig from the bottle. "It's when something's bloodless," Leo had answered, chucking a huge stone into the water. It sank instantly, barely leaving a splash in its wake. Like a war with no bloodshed. Garrett laughed at this. Sounds like every day to me, he'd said. I've always wondered what he meant by that. Story 6. There was a camera in my apartment. Hi, my name is Elias, and I'm currently holed up in a shitty motel that I'm pretty sure is infested with ants. But that's not really the point of this. The point is I'm looking for help, or maybe even an answer to this horrid twist life has taken. It started a month and a half ago when I finally managed to save enough money to move out of my parents' house. After searching through Facebook groups and listing websites, I finally found an apartment complex on the other side of town. It wasn't as close to my job as I had been hoping, but if it meant getting away from the problem that is my family, it was going to have to do. So after a quick look at the available apartment and an agreement on the lease, I packed up my belongings and got started on a new chapter of my life. With the help of some friends, we set up what little I had in a matter of 5 days. The apartment was a typical layout: 1 bedroom, a bathroom, and an open space that was half living room and half kitchen. I even got to meet a few of my neighbors while moving in. The apartment beside mine was owned by an elderly couple named Alan and Ingrid. They told me they had been there for over 20 years and babysat for most of the children that came and went throughout the passing decades. They seemed excited that someone was finally moving into the apartment beside theirs and told me their door was always open if I had trouble. Across the hall was an older man, maybe early 30s, named Jorge. He came by when his dog, Benny, bolted out the front door and into my apartment. We had spent at least 20 minutes luring the animal out from under the sink in the bathroom, and when he finally decided to come out, Jorge sighed and apologized. I told him I didn't mind and actually had a liking for dogs, even mentioned the one I owned growing up. He gave quite an interesting response to that. Jorge had looked me up and down real slow, like he was inspecting every inch of my body. Then, with a big toothy grin, he said, "Bet you're a handful, just like him." Yeah, I did not like that. Thankfully, after maybe a 5-minute staring contest, he gave a nod and left. The people in the apartment next to him were less odd, but still left a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was a family: a dad, mom, and 2 twin girls. The girls, Lacey and Alice, seemed excited to see me and even gave me some drawings they had made as a welcome gift. Their father, Leon, gave me a firm handshake and said it was nice to see a younger face around the building. He said it was mainly elderly that came and went, which really confused me, seeing as how close it was to the public elementary and middle schools. But I brushed off the thought and turned to his wife with my hand raised for a handshake. She didn't take it. Instead, she stared into my eyes for a solid minute before looking at her husband. He stiffened, coughed, and reached out to lower my hand. A pause. I watched as his Adam's apple bobbed. She doesn't like being touched. Oh, I felt embarrassed now, glancing between them both before I managed to smile at the woman. Sorry about that. I'll make sure to keep my distance. She smiled, nodded, then ushered the girls inside. They whined and tugged on my sleeves for a bit, but after a stern glare from their mother, they mumbled their goodbyes and ran off into the apartment. After another handshake with their father, he soon followed after and shut the door, leaving me alone with his wife. We just kind of stared at each other, not really saying anything. She didn't seem like much of a talker, but after a pure minute of silence, I got uneasy. I'm Elias, by the way. She blinked at me. What's I trailed off and debated just how worth it this would be. What's your name? She blinked again. At this point, I was starting to give up and even started to turn away to head back into the apartment. I still had some unpacking to do at that point. But as my hand reached for the doorknob, I heard her. Willow. Her voice was quiet, a little raspy even. I could barely catch the name she had said. Willow, I repeated, nodding along like it was the most interesting name I'd ever heard. Well, it's nice to meet Y dash. The words died on my tongue as I turned around to find myself face to face with her. I could feel her breath fanning my face, the tip of her nose barely brushing against my own. Her pupils were blown. I could barely see the iris. She inhaled just once, shoulders raising and chest puffing out. I don't even think she let it out when she spoke one more time. Welcome home. Then just like that, she was gone. Before I could even try to think of a response, Willow was rushing down the stairs and to her car in the parking lot. I watched as she got in the driver's seat, turned the key, and looked at me. smiled at me from the first floor to the third before the car backed up, turned, and sped down the street. All I could do was laugh. Short and a little uneasy. I was already starting to regret moving out. A month had passed since then, and I had started to slowly grow closer to my neighbors. Alan liked to take me out on fishing trips, and Ingrid taught me how to bake. I can confidently say I make a damn good peach cobbler. Leon was nice. We mainly just had passing conversations when grabbing the mail, or simply passing in the hall. Sometimes Willow would be with him and just smile at me. I try my best to ignore it for the sake of the girls who I had the pleasure of babysitting once or twice when their parents had date nights. Lacey loves to draw, and Alice wants to make a movie someday. That leaves Jorge. How do I even begin? He likes to stare at certain places. I catch him during my drives to work or when I took the girls to the nearby pool. I started wearing shirts with my swim trunks. I try to be nice, waving or smiling at him when I got back from work. I even offered to walk his dog for him, which ended up being a mistake. The first time he brought Benny over, he barged into my home and said something about needing to use the bathroom. When he came out 15 minutes later, my toothbrush and shampoo were gone. I never walked Benny again. But it seemed like the world wasn't satisfied with that outcome because at the beginning of that very next month, just a few days after the bathroom incident, my car broke down. And my job? Fired me. Can't do your job without a car to get you there. Fuck you, John, you slimy bitch. So there I was, jobless, careless, and trapped in my apartment while I looked for a job within walking distance. I didn't bother to fix the car. The thing was a piece of junk anyway, and I didn't really have the money. Plus, when I asked the tow service to check what happened, they told me something that still scares me to this day. Basically, everything that had a wire had been cut, and when they checked under the dashboard, they found an AirTag. I don't know where the hell that thing came from. I definitely didn't put it there, and my parents were shit with technology, so it couldn't have been them. I thought maybe whoever messed with my car must have placed it, but that didn't make any sense. Why place a tracker if you were just going to kill everything? And if it wasn't them, then maybe someone else put it there? Sometime between when I first arrived to when the car was tampered with. Someone was trying to keep an eye on me. But why do that? I'm no one. I try to distract myself by spending more time with my neighbors, the good ones at least. I started filling a journal with all the recipes Ingrid was teaching me, and Alan took me to play poker with a few of his buddies. I lost, of course, but they all just laughed and let me keep trying until I eventually won my first game. They cheered, laughed, and I bought a round for the table. Life was starting to look up again as the weeks went by. I managed to get an interview with the post office downtown, and I had another one scheduled with this cute little ice cream parlor my friends and I like to spend time at. Everything was going my way. Until I babysat the girls again. It was around 4 when they were dropped off, giving a hug and kiss to their mom and dad before the two went off for their usual date night. The girls seemed excited to see me, running around and giggling as I booted up my old GameCube for them to play. Once they heard the familiar menu music from Luigi's Mansion, the giggling stopped and they crashed onto the couch with eager hands reaching for the controller. All right, you little monsters. No fighting over the controller, okay? You get 20 minutes, and then you switch. Okay, Mr. Blackwell. If you get stuck, I'll be at the table. I reached down to mess up Alice's hair before walking off to the table, tucked away in the corner where my laptop was waiting. Sliding into the seat, I typed in the password before starting to browse through college websites. I was still looking for a job, but I figured it'd be nice to go to school again. I took a couple years off after graduating high school and figured it'd be fun to take some online courses. I had to have been at the table for only half an hour before I felt a tugging on my pant leg. Looking down, I found Lacey staring up at me with a frown. Mr. Blackwell, the light won't stop blinking again. Blinking? Honey, the lights are fine. They're not blinking. I gestured to the nearby lamp, but her frown only deepened. Not that light. The little one. Turning around, she pointed towards the bookshelf on the right of the TV. Sure enough, almost completely hidden by the photo on one of the shelves was a small, blinking red light. Standing from the table, I walked over and pushed the photo to the side. It was a camera. It was small, square-shaped, and solid black except for the red light coming from the top left corner. I never felt as nauseous as I did at that moment. I placed my thumb over the lens and picked it up before turning to the girls who were staring at me. Lacey, I need you to get my phone so I can call your parents. Am I in trouble? No, no, no. You're not in trouble. I just need you to get my phone from the nightstand in my room. She hesitated, looking from my face to the device in my hand before running off down the hall. When she came back with my phone, I called their parents, told them they needed to hurry home, and then stuffed the camera into an old jewelry box. I try not to show how shaken up I was in front of the girls. They were far too young to understand what was going on, and I was not going to be the cause of any nightmares. When their parents finally got home and Willow ushered them into their apartment, I asked to talk to Leon. He seemed hesitant at first, glancing into the hall over his shoulder as he followed me into the apartment. Once we both sat at the table, he seemed to relax and finally looked at me. So, you said Lacey found something? Yeah, she... Fuck, man. I don't even know where to begin. Just letting out a heavy sigh, I grabbed the jewelry box and slid it across the table. Look. He gave me a strange look, like I had gone insane or something. But he decided to humor me, reaching for the box and lifting the lid just slightly. When he caught sight of the camera still blinking inside, he slammed the lid back onto it with a haunted look in his eyes. Neither of us said anything for a while. Him, from what I assume was shock, and me from waiting for him to start off. He didn't, so I let out an awkward cough and gestured to the box. I don't know where it came from or how long I dash. Did you tell anyone else? My hands stilled in the air, and I glanced around in confusion. I mean, I told you guys to come and dash. Before I knew it, Leon was on his feet and fisting his hands in the front of my shirt. He lifted me from the chair and slammed me full force against the wall, body trembling with what was either anger or fear. I think it was both. Did you tell anyone else? And no, I didn't. I want to get the girls out of the apartment before I called the cops. Cops! Blue irises darted around the wall behind me as drool-covered lips pulled into a smile. Cops, he repeated, hands tightening as he jostled me. He leaned in, and I turned my head. I could feel his breath fanning the side of my neck as my hands grabbed onto warm wrists, trying to pull his hands out from my shirt. I fucking whimpered, as his nose nudged against my skin. I didn't know what to do. Leon was bigger than me, stronger than me. I didn't know if he was going to kill me or do something else. All I knew was that I was scared and trapped in my own fucking home. As I felt his lips touch flesh, I decided to try and scream for help. But before I could, I heard a cough. We both stilled and looked at the doorway, and right there like a beam of light in a world of darkness. Ingrid! I started crying at the sight of her, one hand reaching out like this frail old lady was somehow going to manage to get this 6-foot beast off of me. And to my surprise and relief, she kind of did. With one stern look, she had Leon dropping me on the floor and shuffling out of the apartment with his head hung. As soon as the door to his own shut, she walked towards me and knelt onto the floor. Are you all right, dear? I thought. I know. You're safe now. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing into her shoulder as she continued to shush me. We were on the floor for maybe 10 minutes before I finally started to calm down. Rising off the floor, I glanced briefly at the jewelry box before picking it up and holding it out. Ingrid seemed to understand, taking the box from my hands and checking what was inside. She shut it just like Leon had. Instead, this time, she let out an almost sad sigh and placed the box back on the table. Have you called the cops, dear? No, I haven't. I was going to do it right after telling Leon. Don't. What? Reaching out, she grabbed my hands and looked me in the eyes. Listen to me, dear. You're not going to call the cops. You're going to put the camera back where you found it and go about life like usual. Ingrid, I don't understand, Dash. I know you don't, but you need to trust me. Put it back. And she left. She just let me go and walked out, leaving me with more questions that I'd started with. She wanted me to just put the camera back and pretend this whole thing never happened. That thing had been in my apartment for God knows how long, capturing and recording my every move. And to make it worse, whoever planted that now had footage of the girls. I couldn't let this creep get away with something like that. So despite Ingrid's words, I packed a bag and left with the jewelry box in my pocket. So yeah, now I'm in a motel about a mile away. For whatever reason, no one wants me to give that camera to the authorities. Ingrid looked so worried when she told me to put it back, like she knew something was going to happen if I didn't. And Leon, God, I don't even know what happened to him. I don't know if I want to know. Just the idea of me telling the cops about the camera set him off like a wild animal. Whoever left the camera must have threatened them or something. Honestly, that was the least of my worries. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm bringing the camera to the cops and telling them everything that I know. For now, I just wanted to get the word out and see if maybe this has happened to anyone else. Please, if you've ever found a camera in your home, help me. Story 7. I want to help. Dear gentle people, I've spent a significant amount of time on this subreddit over the past couple of years. And by God, have people done some stupid shit. I am here to help, through familial relations and knack for finding places and things I shouldn't and talents considered unnatural by some I know. And I am here to share my knowledge with you. All of the stories we've read here are based on the fact that reality is actually quite weak, and once it starts slipping, it almost never stops. People don't know how to stop it. I am here to hopefully teach some of the more clever ones here what to do. First things first, follow the damn rules. Almost all the run-of-the-mill reality fuckery follows certain rules, and specific circumstances warp reality, which allows some rules to lose efficacy. However, humans being humans, we tend to find out the new rules by trial and error, often involving some better him than me sacrifice. And when we follow these things work out fine, giving us the list of stories we are all familiar with. The best outcome is usually survival by having followed the rules. The way to fix a clusterfuck like this is to re-establish reality by introducing more, stronger observers. This is difficult because situations like this tend to attract people who are already slipping down the drain and are less bound to reality than most. Yes, the people who get in these situations are less real than most, definitely less real than me and my companions, probably not that much worse off than you, unfortunately. Your best bet is to restore your own reality simply by interacting more. Crawl out of your hole and find people in normal places. Whatever you do, don't go to that shady, secretive rave you've heard of and probably got invited to. I guarantee you nobody there's on the right side of the reality collapse you're sinking into. Go grocery shopping when it's busy, stand in line in a coffee shop during rush hour, and interact with normal people doing normal things. A sense of isolation is one of the first things you will notice before shit breaks down. Second, and already touched upon, assert your reality. Reality is fragile and drags things down with it. A good example is the US nowadays. It's simply too big to have enough observers everywhere in order to keep things from going to shit. Ghost towns abound where a handful of people live. If you come from one of these small towns, you'll be able to tell. When you reach a new place, one closer to being fully real, you'll notice a number of things. The air feels fresher. Breathing is like drinking that first sip of water after a long, warm day. The weather feels more committed. No vague dreariness or exhaustive, lifeless heat, but cold, biting rain, burning sun you feel deep in your bones, wind that buffets you instead of isolating you. You yourself will feel more aware, as if you finally woke up after a slow, early morning. Not the sudden jolt of caffeine, but actual awareness. And you'll remember all the little things you've failed to notice because you're slowly becoming less of an observer, less real in your dilapidated town, circling the drain. The man without a shadow, the mother with an empty stroller, the lady with twins that have been the same age for years now, the dog that doesn't actually look like any kind of dog you've ever heard of, the lack of insects in the day-to-day, the overabundance of pests that invade your house. No ants in the garden, no bees in the field, flies and cockroaches in your bed and kitchen. The childhood friend you've helped move away, but who never left or returned unnoticed, failing to assert his reality in a place a few rungs up the ladder. Who walks around blank-faced and unseeing gaze. He's farther down the hole than you are. I don't think he can be salvaged. But you just might. Third, avoid slipping away. Don't take the fucking night gig. The moment someone tells you, I have a lucrative graveyard shift job, there's just some rules to follow, turn around, and walk away. And if it's your childhood buddy with his blank stare, run. When you see a building or entrance that shouldn't be, don't go in. Not one step. It might seem like a small thing. After all, what's one step into the darkness? But it's an enormous leap from a reality standpoint. It's a deliberate move downhill into obscurity, and many of you have already done this at least once. Remember the time you woke up to piss? How was the hall a bit longer and a bit darker? How the bathroom felt deeper, the damp smell, the sound of something keeping very still, the relief when you got back in bed beyond the emptying of a bladder? That was a threshold, and you would have been better off pissing the bed. When you see a pair of stairs in the woods, don't go up. You won't get down the same place, if at all. Except that nature can hold a grudge, and some places are out for blood. I don't have any tips there. I don't fuck with cornfields 3 hours away from anything that matters. And I don't go into the woods to find some long-forgotten forest god who went insane with age. Gods are some reality fucking bullshit in and of themselves. Ask me if you like, but know that curling up and dying is often the better choice. If you feel real enough and the forest is kind to humans, the woods can help. But if you are slipping, stay out of the scary places like all of Appalachia, Aokigahara, Hoyabachu. Fourth, don't give up. You are a human, goddammit. You are an observer, and with practice you can fix this shit. Everything out to get you is either afraid or jealous of you. These things invariably manifest as anger, hatred, and obsession. Don't allow the things that go bump in the night to lure you in. Don't allow the drown to drag you down to the depths. Focus on the mundane. Focus on the real. Keep reaching out. Do not give in to the void. It's not calmness and rest. It's nothingness. It's lack of being. And you'll just turn into a hollow shell, all scooped out and ready to be worn by whatever the broken rules allow. Fucked up and ready to mingle. If you can, get a pet. Your reality and theirs reinforces one another. Two entities stand out more than one. The awareness required to take good care of your pet will make you a stronger observer. And if you get really good and want to start kicking back, you're already 50% of the way to a familiar. But for now, look around, assess how real you still are. I'm warning you, you won't like what you find. You're probably less real than you thought. And I'm sorry, knowing is the only way to get better. But it's also the worst way to stay hidden. The ones that have already slipped away will become jealous. Your childhood buddy will contact you soon. Don't meet up. P.S. If you live in the Appalachians, I can't help you. All you can do is get out now. Whatever drain I was talking about. You're stuck in a fucking metaphorical whirlpool. Seriously, fuck the Appalachians. Story 8. I found an extra light switch in my apartment, and it ruined my life. It's been about 7 months since I signed my year-long lease for this shithole apartment. I don't think I'll be making it another 5 months. I'm not sure if I'll even make it another night. My cheapness might have cost me my life. I was going to make this a short cry for help before I remembered that no one would ever believe me, and it would be too late anyway. Hell, I wouldn't believe this if I stumbled across it. I'll just take my time here and pour my heart out. 7 months ago, I made what I now realize was the worst decision of my life. I moved into this dumpy-ass apartment building after finally making the move out of my hometown. I had romanticized the idea of escapism so much. I picture myself in New York City or something like that, walking down the sidewalk with some overpriced coffee in my hands and my tasteful messenger bag slung around my shoulder. I'd be walking to somewhere idyllic, maybe a get-together with new friends that took an interest in me or something like that. I never made it too far into that daydream. I just wanted to get out of that little rural town. It was one of those towns that was just a road with a bunch of sad old signs along it. Blown-out buildings with occasional passing silhouettes that were once somebody's. Let's just say I couldn't afford New York City, but I could afford a small city a few hours from that rotting place of a town. It's a city with some high rises and skyscrapers, but nothing that's going to put it on somebody's road trip. It's a pretty lonely place, honestly. It's old and tired like my hometown, but in a more industrial way. Walkability isn't much of a reality here unless you want to take your chances with the harsh weather or the rampant mugging. So there went my sidewalk daydream. Still, I wanted to make the most of the experience. I got an apartment right downtown for a reasonable price and figured life would improve from there on. However, I failed to truly grasp how much of a piece of shit the apartment was until I moved in. I was a little too naive at the time to understand the spectrum of stress caused by a landlord special. The doorknobs would come right off, the fridge never fully shut, the toilet wouldn't flush without some sacred jiggling sequence, and a whole mess of other inconveniences or hazards. This apartment also has a lot of strange features. The floor plan doesn't make much sense, and anyone with a shred of interior design knowledge or even just self-respect would have immediately crossed this place off their list. I was so desperate, though, that I didn't mind when I entered the apartment and just saw a hallway full of closed doors. I shrugged off how strange it was that each room was contained behind one of those doors, with none of the rooms connecting to one another. The kitchen is its own closed-off room. The living room, too. The only way to get anywhere in the apartment was to take the central hallway. It honestly looks like one of those hallway chase shots in Scooby-Doo or some shit. For how awful the place is, it's not small. There are a good amount of rooms, and I actually hadn't been able to fill one particular room until recently. When you walk into the place, there's the long hallway and then 9 doors total. There's 4 on the left side, 4 on the right, and 1 at the very end of the hallway. On the right side, the doors in order are the living room, a closet, then my bedroom, and then the bathroom. On the left side, it starts with the kitchen, then another closet, the dining room, and a second bedroom. The 9th door in the middle is that extra room. I barely had enough stuff just to fill the other rooms, and I lacked any sort of motivation to do anything with the extra room for a while. I have a corner unit, so all the rooms on the right side of the apartment have windows as well as the extra room. The extra room has these neat casement windows that I like to look out of but offer little privacy. I had thought to make the extra room a sort of reading area or a home theater type deal, but I was flat broke. The extra room is strange. It's really big and open. It feels like an apartment of its own. One night, I was in there just looking out at the other surrounding high rises when I noticed a light switch that had been painted over right next to the window. I didn't think much of it. It was clearly just another amenity of my shithole apartment. I left it alone. As time went on, I found myself in that extra room most nights just looking out the window. I didn't have the money for any fancy streaming services nor friends to leech off of, so I just looked out that window most nights. It was peaceful, and at night the city looked bigger and more lively. I loved seeing all the different lights, the blurry shapes of people in their own world watching their TV or making dinner. It didn't take long for me to start picking at the paint on that hidden light switch as I watched the world wind down every night. I'd chip away at the paint little by little with my finger while I was lost in my thoughts. It took a few days to make any sort of progress, but eventually I had peeled off enough paint to see the light switch. It was a different color than the new plain white paint that covered everything else. It was bronze, and the switch itself was almost antique looking. It got me wondering how old this building was. A few nights later, the old switch was finally uncovered. It caught the light in an intoxicating way, and I flipped the switch on and off a few times to see if it still worked and what it controlled. Nothing changed. The next night brought a heavy snowstorm. It was beautiful, and you already know I was set up at that window, staring out at the world as the brilliant snow fell. At some point, I was reminded of the bronze light switch, and I flicked it, not remembering if I'd already tried it the night before. Nothing changed. I absent-mindedly flicked it again and noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. A light turned on in the building across the street. It was the rightmost room on the top floor of the neighboring high-rise, which was quite a bit taller than my building. At first, I just thought it was something new to look at. My hand still on the switch, I craned my neck up and leaned in to watch the new light. I lost concentration and flicked the switch down, and the room's light turned off. That caught my attention. I looked down at the switch and back up at the now dark pane of glass. I flipped the switch up, and at that exact moment, the room's light turned back on. I continued doing this for probably 5 minutes, just flipping the switch on and off and watching as the faraway room's light perfectly matched. The snow began falling even more, but I could still make out the light turning off and on with every flick of the old switch. I was baffled before too long. So baffled that I went right to sleep, convinced I was deprived of logic and reasoning. The next night came, and at first, I was definitely reluctant to mess with that switch or to even go in that room. I tried staring out other windows, but they were cloudy with trapped moisture. I remember thinking I should get a cat or something before I finally caved and walked into the extra room. There was traffic on the street below from some accident that night, and it provided me with enough entertainment to remain distracted from what happened the night before. The standstill row of gray cars could only stimulate me for so long before I was looking at that switch again. I flipped it. Such a harmless action. And so quick, too. Flipping a light switch. Usually done by second nature. What's the harm in it? Why did flipping that switch feel so important? The same room from the night before lit up. It was a yellow, more vintage-looking tone of light. I tried using some beaten-up binoculars from my childhood, but all I got was a somehow fuzzier view of the room. From my vantage, I could only really see the ceiling of that mysterious place. That's got to be an apartment, right? It looks too big to be a storage closet, too small to be anything commercial. I flipped the switch again, and the light turned off in perfect succession. Is somebody fucking with me? Flip. The light came back on. How would they even orchestrate that? I sat there for a long time, repeatedly flipping the switch on and off, as if the repetition of this would bring more clarity. I stood there flipping that switch on and off like I was a geriatric old man smacking a television set, hoping for a signal. The traffic jam cleared out, and the streets became empty. I sat there, still as I could be, periodically flipping the switch on and off. The light synced every single time. Clearly, this light switch, for some reason, was wired to that room in the building across the street. As to why, I had no earthly idea. One expensive project, and for what? What purpose does it serve? I flipped the switch up, and the light came back on. That last flip of the switch activated a light bulb moment within me. What if I found a way into that room? So I waited in the bitter cold, rehearsing my moves. I had counted up from the ground and determined the room, which connected to my light switch, was on the 31st floor, and again, it was the corner unit on the right side of the building when viewing from my apartment. I waited for someone to go in or out of the building. Finally, I saw a woman with a giant coat drag her scrappy little dog towards the door. I was hesitant to actually go inside, but then I gathered some courage, walked right up to that door, and casually slid through as she opened it. I had planned some elaborate cover story that my friend wouldn't answer his phone and all that, but when it came time, I just acted natural and thanked her as I entered. The halls were green and sickly looking, much like my apartment building. The elevator was questionable at best and creaked a little too much as I stepped into it. There were 33 floors, so I was glad I had made note of the correct one. I slowly reached up and hit the circular button for the 31st floor, and it flickered on, glowing with a jaundiced yellow. My hands grew clammy as the elevator ascended at a torturously slow pace. I watched the numbers rise. 11, 12, 13. This is a stupid idea, man. This is all in my head. Why am I doing this? 26, 27, 28. Is this even legal? What am I going to do exactly? The elevator finally dinged and bounced to a stop on the 31st floor before I had an actual plan. The doors were reluctant to open, and for a moment, my heart sank thinking I had been trapped in there. Those silver doors creaked and warped as they moved out of the way and exposed me to another green hallway. I stepped out and turned left. I could see all the way down the long, dilapidated hall, the green lights humming and buzzing. My alleged culprit was the final door on the right. It was room 3118. I sat outside the door like a maniac just looking at it. I wondered what to do. I could barely see through the slits on the sides of the door. All I could make out was that the lights were on in there. Do I knock? I looked around me and made sure the coast was clear. What the hell do I say? Maybe I'm lost. Maybe it's an honest mistake. If anyone lives there, I'm sure they're very confused about their lights turning on and off. But why wouldn't they take control of their own lights? Maybe they can't use them, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would I be able to control their lights, but they CA? I knocked on the door and startled myself. It felt almost automatic. Unsure of what to do, I started to shuffle away and make my retreat. Then I decided to stay and wait. I waited for a few seconds. The pause was long and uncomfortable enough for my hand to instinctually rise for another round of knocking. A faint and vague sound, dampened enough to even be of my own mind. But it was the sound of dragging or a thud of some kind with something rolling afterward. What was that? The sound might have continued, or my mind might have kept wandering. Maybe the neighbors? The walls were thin in this place. I could begin to hear indiscernible conversation somewhere down the hall. I could hear the hissing chatter of a TV show somewhere else. Underneath all that, though, in room 3118, a rolling sound still. Maybe? What is that noise? I left not long after. I was getting freaked out, and I'm sure I would have freaked out anyone living there. When I got back to my place across the street, I felt very paranoid. I felt like I was being watched. I opened the squeaky door to my apartment and the long, dark hallway of 9 closed doors now made me nauseous with dread. I wanted to leave that apartment behind and run back into my mom's arms or something. I felt like a child. I walked in, though, and I wish I hadn't. I took a scorching hot shower. It made me feel a little better, but I was still so paranoid. I kept hearing, or thought I was hearing, similar thudding and rolling sounds in one of the other rooms. Old pipes, that's all. It took some more courage to leave the bathroom and enter the cold, dark hall. I didn't know what door to go through next, the kitchen door, bedroom door, or the extra door. My stomach was in a knot, but I thought I should probably try and eat something. It was around midnight by that point, and I felt hopeless knowing there were so many more hours of dark left. I looked down at my half-eaten peanut butter sandwich and knew this knot in my stomach wouldn't go away if I didn't have some kind of closure. I wanted to go into the extra room and turn off that switch for the night. I braved the silent hallway again and opened up the 9th door into that grand room that turned the faintest sound into a booming echo. I walked up to the big window I always looked out of and, with great caution, looked up at room 3118. The light was still on, and there was something up there now. I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a big shadow. It wasn't a person, but something boxy looking. Something square or just rigid, really. Furniture? Did someone move something around in there? I didn't know what I was looking at, and I honestly didn't have the mental space to think about it much longer. I flipped off the light. I flipped it back on. I couldn't deny my interest. I was very invested in this whole ordeal now. The rigid thing started moving. At least I thought it looked like it was slowly changing position. It moved very smoothly and very, very slow. It looked like it was rolling or sliding. It rolled from the right side of the window to the left. I flipped the switch here and there to see if it made any sort of difference. It didn't seem to. I watched it roll along for a few minutes from right to left until I jumped at the sight of the neighboring window's light turning on. It was whoever lived in room 3116. I saw a person moving around in there, and it looked like a more elderly man. He looked like he was listening closely to something, as if there were an intruder in his house. I didn't know what to do, but now I felt intrusive watching this man fumble around. I decided to switch the light off in 3118 and try to forget about the whole thing. I wanted to remove myself from this weird nightmare entirely. I decided that the next day I'd try to disconnect the switch and install some curtains. Find a new hobby. That all sounded like something rooted in everyday monotony, and I let the comfort of curtain shopping lull me to sleep. In my sleep that night, I heard the sound of aggressive wind chimes far away. They weren't very melodic wind chimes, so just one tone that reverberated. Then I heard an awful banging sound. It was loud and most definitely not a dream. It sounded distant, but it contained a lot of power. It was 3:48 a.m. I tossed, and I turned some until my bedroom started flashing red. I got out of bed and tried to see what was happening outside from my bedroom window, but I couldn't see through all the gloom trapped in between the glass. I had no choice but to go into the extra room if I wanted to see outside. There was a large fire truck that was blocking off one side of the road, and police were putting up caution tape on the other. Squad cars were rolling in one after the other. A few ambulances were present too, but it seemed like no one was in a big rush. They were all circled around, their hands waving about in a casual, conversational way. At some point, one of them looked up and pointed, and the others followed along. I followed the trajectory of the gestures all the way to the 31st floor. Room 3116 was now missing its pane of glass. The curtains whipped out into the open world. The lights were still on, and I could make out vague details of the interior. Back on the ground, a few paramedics moved out of the way long enough for me to see what I was already preparing to see. The old man from room 3116 was laying there in a confusing mess of fabric, flesh, and bones surrounded by a growing puddle of blood. I was shocked. What the hell is going on? What did I do? Am I losing my mind? Did I inadvertently kill that man? The next few days were a blur. My head was heavy with the endless hum of 1,000 different thoughts, all saying similar things. I felt an immense weight of guilt, even though there was nothing tangible that connected me to the old man's plunge. In my head, there was an ever-growing web of continuity. I uncovered the old switch, I flipped it incessantly, and, in doing that, I created or resumed something. That something looked like a giant fucking rectangle that rolled around and made a man jump to his death. Or maybe it pushed him out by force. But why? None of this makes any sense. Maybe it's all just make-believe. I could have misunderstood what I saw, the rolling rectangle thing. Maybe it was just an illusion. That old man? Maybe it's just a coincidence he chose tonight to leap. I know what I saw. I no longer was going into the extra room for any reason. The thought of that big empty space with that damn switch made me nauseous. I couldn't stand sleeping just a few doors away from it. I wanted to move out and get away. I should have done that. Reality doesn't make room for fiction, though. I couldn't and still can't afford to break my lease, not by a long shot. That's 3 rent payments and a bundle of paperwork in this godforsaken building. The apartment's obviously outdated, so I thought about making a case for lead paint or something toxic that could maybe get me out of here for free and quick, but I'm not sure how that'd blow over. I don't even know how to go about doing something like that. I chose the route of avoidance. If I could ignore the extra room, the mystery switch, the dead man's browning blood stain on the road, and the rolling rectangle monster whose whereabouts weren't known, maybe it'd all just fade away with time. A few weeks went by, and that strategy was seeming to work. Even in that short time, I was afforded some hindsight of the whole event, how I was jumping to conclusions, being paranoid, and maybe not appreciating my deteriorating vision that was probably making some serious guesswork. Still, there was no explaining away the light switch. That switch is undoubtedly connected to room 3118, across the street for some unknown reason. I must have tested it hundreds of times. I try to not let that fact dig too deep when I couldn't sleep or when I'd think I heard the rolling sounds across the apartment late at night. Eventually, I had saved up enough money to treat myself with some more furniture. I wanted to reclaim the extra room and make it mine. I started with a thrifted recliner and some shelves. I was planning on making it a home theater after all. I had plans to bury the big casement windows behind blackout curtains. Earlier tonight, I was moving some new finds into the home theater. The room's echo was just as booming and awful as when it was empty, and I flinched with every screech and scrape the furniture would make when I moved it. As I heaved the new TV stand around, my eyes subconsciously checked on room 3118, a reflex that must have been built into me after all those cold nights. The lights were off as I had left them the last time I flipped the switch. The lights were on in room 3116. Don't freak out. Maybe someone new moved in. I watched longer than I should have. I don't know why I'm so nosy. Always trying to get to the bottom of everything. I watched and waited for any sign of movement in room 3116. I never saw a soul in there. At some point, the big coat lady came out of the building with her dog, and for some stupid reason, I felt compelled to go talk to her. I just need to be sure of something. I walked casually down the sidewalk, waiting to run into her again. I was going to ask her if she had a lighter, and then I was going to ask her if she had any information on room 3116. Eventually, she reappeared around the corner with her feisty little dog walking on its hind legs, strangling itself with a leash. I was leaned up on the wall next to the door I had snuck in weeks before, waiting to say my line. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you have a light?" She looked up with confusion. "Like a flashlight?" she asked. I flashed my carton of cigarettes. "Oh, no, honey. I've got asthma, sorry." "No problem," I muttered back. I tried to come up with anything else I could say, so I could eventually segue into room 3116. Blanking, I simply stared ahead in disappointment. That's when I noticed the faded blood stain on the sidewalk from the old man. I clicked my tongue. "Terrible what happened," I muttered. The big coat lady turned around and saw what I was staring at, understanding immediately. "Ugh, I know. I'm up on the 13th floor, and I heard the sound." She was slowly nodding and now staring at the old puddle of blood herself. "I heard someone talking about how they already moved a new family into that unit he was in. Is that right?" I asked, surprising myself. "Oh no, I think they're letting it sit like they did with the last one," she said. My brow raised. I tried to not act like an insane person and scare her off. "The last one?" I asked hesitantly. "Yeah, it was just a few months ago, or maybe it was a year now, but the young couple that lived right next door to him jumped out the window too," she said in a flat way. I could have fainted. I felt dizzy and clammy, but I tried to keep my calm demeanor. That is wow. I'm pretty new to the building, so I hadn't heard. I stammered. I resigned from my niceties, and my eyes went out of focus as my mind began jumping to its newest conclusion. Somewhere in my peripheral, I noticed the lady nodding and looking down at her scraggly dog. "Well, it sure is hard out here these days," she said, breaking the silence. She shuffled through the heavy apartment door which slammed behind her, startling me. Torn from my trance, I quickly retreated back to my apartment. Shit. What does this mean? That rolling square thing lives in that room, and what? Kills people in it and around it? Do the people kill themselves? Does the thing maybe inject them with something that makes them, I don't know, suicidal? Or maybe they go crazy and just jump. I was thinking like a fucking lunatic. Like one of the cracked-out vagrants wandering through the abandoned motels back in my hometown. I tried to slow myself down, but now I've been given perfect evidence to suit my paranoid suspicions. At first, I was just trying to solve this complex series of events. Then I remembered I was involved. I remembered the switch plays a role in this whole thing. The light switch in my home theater. How far can it move? How far? Could it cross the street and climb the stairs and break in? Maybe it's quiet, or maybe it has some kind of way to silently open my door, so I don't notice. So the neighbors don't notice. I found myself back in the home theater with some cheap whiskey in a plastic bottle. I sipped on it and enjoyed the aromatic sting that made me slowly feel braver with every gulp. I looked up at the 31st floor across the street. The lights were still on in room 3116. They're probably just cleaning it out. You need to calm yourself. None of this is your problem. I felt better and braver still with every new swig of the cruel whiskey. At some point, I hover my hand over the light switch. The dwindling sobriety in me said no. The courageous drunk in me said, I'm just curious. My sight was beginning to sharpen and blur, and I could tell I was swaying as I stood in front of those windows. I was drunk enough to where I felt like an observer of a faded memory from the past. I was drunk enough to where any action felt insignificant and all would be fine because nothing mattered. I flipped the switch, expecting the lights of room 3118 to blink on. The lights in room 3116 turned off instead. Shit, I don't know why, but seeing those lights turn off made me duck and hide below the window. I felt like I woke the rolling thing up, and now it could see me. Shit, it moved. It fucking moved. Logic and reasoning was now out the window. The lights magically switched rooms, and I can only imagine it's because the square rolling thing now occupied, or will now materialize, inside of room 3116. I continued hiding and thinking horrible thoughts to myself. I then did something I would have never done had I not been wasted. I grabbed a hammer and smashed that fucking light switch. I smashed it into a million pieces and then smashed those pieces into dust. I'm sure my neighbors were fuming, but I had been quiet as a church mouse up until tonight. Both room 3118 and 3116 now had no lights on, and I had made the drunken assumption that now they were both safe. This all began when I turned the lights on in 3118. Now the lights would stay off forever, and I made sure of it. Clearly, I didn't have the self-control to stop myself from tinkering with this unknown thing. I doubt anyone else who would live here would have much more discipline. So I smashed the fucking switch into a million pieces. It wasn't long before I blacked out. Something woke me up hours later. It was deep into the night. I was still in the home theater and still drunk, but now also hungover. I tried to pull it together enough to figure out what woke me. I thought it was a loud sound, but maybe it wasn't. The air felt like something loud had just occurred, but that was just a feeling, maybe one of paranoia. I looked out the window and half expected to see another person or persons lying smashed on the ground after diving off the 31st floor, but I saw no such horror. Both 3118 and 3116 lights were still off. I rubbed my eyes and looked around the pitch-black room. I felt my blood freeze. There was a light on in my apartment. I could see the thin sliver of yellow illuminating underneath the door of the home theater. It's in. I wanted to run it first, but then I wanted to sit still and just listen. So I sat there, waiting for something. Maybe it was waiting for me to make a move. Then I heard it, muffled, maybe in the kitchen, rolling. Finally, I could hear the sound in finer detail. The wheels sounded heavy, like the sound of a stone tomb opening. The cheap hardwood floor buckled and cracked underneath those giant rolling wheels which must have moved extremely slow and calculated, as if it was listening for my heartbeat. I was frozen with fear and confused, so confused. What kind of nightmare has my life become? I want to try and make a break for it. I thought about running as fast as I could down my awful hallway and ripping that front door open. It was only a few quick strides away. I sat up a little too quickly. Adrenaline was kicking in. A spring in a shitty secondhand recliner I had passed out on popped, causing an insignificant yet audible click throughout the house. Rolling followed. It was very slow, so slow that one's ear could lose the deep droning tone after long enough to background noise. I slowly sat back and the recliner crinkled ever so softly. The thing made a noise so intentionally imperceptible I could hardly make it out. A metallic sliding sound. The sound of a door's latch being methodically opened. It was leaving the kitchen, and maybe it was moving on to one of the other doors now. The yellow sliver of light went out, and the apartment was now totally dark. Rolling persisted, and I was barely able to perceive the noise. I spent the next few minutes sliding off my recliner with the precision of prey, which I undoubtedly had become. 30 minutes could have passed before I had crawled close enough to see under the door's crack. I carefully positioned my left eye to where I could see out into the black hallway, just enough. Something impossibly dark, darker than the natural blackness of night. It was just sitting in the hall, waiting. It was large and boxy, just like that silhouette in 3118. It looked to almost perfectly fit the dimensions of the hall, leaving me sealed in. I'm dead. Maybe not. Maybe I can call the police or something and distract them. It'd kill them, though, right? Then I'd be a murderer, maybe? Or maybe it would roll away. Maybe it isn't bulletproof. I can't have anyone else's blood on my hands. Maybe I can start a fire somehow, and then the fire department will be able to rescue me from the window. Maybe that's the stupidest thought I've ever had. Too much noise. I can't make any noise. I can't make a sound or it'll come get me. My thoughts were so frantic and visceral, I feared even they would make a sound which could be intercepted by the masterful listener sitting mere feet away. Another 30 minutes of eternity, and I had silently made my way towards the large windows. I was so cautious and so deliberate in my movements as to not touch the tiniest plastic shard on the ground from when I had drunkenly destroyed the light switch. Maybe I made it angry by doing that. Maybe, in breaking the switch, the thing reverted back to me. Or maybe I exposed myself to it when I smashed that switch. I tried to use my phone and call for help, text for help, fucking email for help. None of it was going through. That damn rolling demon must have jammed my signal somehow. I ran out of hope. I froze in place. Eventually, I just started to write all of this. I'm still in the home theater, typing all of this out on my phone as quietly as I can, even sipping the last of my whiskey with the most delicate swigs one could imagine. This whole thing is rather bleak, and I apologize if you stumble across this. I've scheduled this post to go up in 8 hours. Maybe by then the thing will have left, and my final words will get out into the world to be forgotten or laughed at. I'm sure you think I'm insane, or maybe I'm just a liar. And that's okay. I know what happened here tonight. I don't know how or why any of this happened, but I know the rolling thing outside my door is real. I don't know why it's here, what its motivation is, if it's man-made or some impersonation of something we'd engineer, or maybe it's the very muse of humanity's chase for right angles and industrial design. I now understand how those people in room 3118 and 3116 met their fate on the cracked pavement below. I think it wants me to kill myself. Either that, or it's totally content with me killing myself. It's had me trapped in this room for hours now. It could have barged in and flattened me at any point, but it hasn't yet. Funny how this all started in this damn extra room of mine. Funny how these windows are the ideal design and size for me to throw myself from this hellish place. I don't know anymore. At this point, I'm just trying to buy time and sip more whiskey before the inevitable. I had been distracted in writing this for a few hours, and even began to have hope that when the sun came up, the thing would roll away. All I'd need is a few minutes to get out. I don't think I'm so lucky, though. The sky is beginning to brighten into a deep blue, and once again I hear that steady rolling. So slow and meticulous, it must only be moving a centimeter every 15 minutes. The whiskey is doing a job, and it's becoming hard to type, harder to maintain literacy. I think LL wrap this up here. I'm sorry, everyone. I can only hope this is seen, and if you did see this, I thank you for keeping me company, in a way. The sun is almost up. I hear rolling, and it's close. The view from the window is very nice. It's looking like a nice day. I hope it is a nice day. Story 9. What's your scariest hostel experience? I'm Mahamudul, and this story takes place back when I was in 11th grade. I spent that entire year living in a hostel. There were 4 sections in total, and I stayed in the first one, right next to the staircase and the bathroom. Our room had 13 of us packed in together. Most nights we stayed awake until 1 or 2 in the morning, then had to get up by 6 when the hostel super would come around to wake us. He wasn't exactly the nicest guy, more of a strict, bitter type, so we'd often mess with him. At night, when he was asleep, we'd knock on his door and run away, or throw little stones from far just to annoy him. That was our usual hostel life. But then, things took a very strange turn. One night, while I was in our room studying, a group of my friends were in another room, coming up with a new plan. They wanted to scare everyone by pretending there was a ghost in the hostel. I had no idea what they were planning, because after finishing my studying around midnight, I fell asleep early. Later that night, something woke me up. I felt someone tugging at my toes. At first, I thought I was just dreaming, but then it happened again. Someone was actually pulling at my toes while I was lying in bed. The third time it happened, I quickly pulled the blanket off of myself and looked. What I saw made my heart sink. Across the room, I saw a tall figure, wearing a long white kurta, swaying its arms slowly as it walked. My blood ran cold. I shook my friend Diderot, who was lying next to me, but he brushed me off, saying I was imagining things and told me to just sleep. I pulled the blanket over my head, terrified, and tried to sleep again. But soon after, I felt the same thing, that tugging on my toes. This time, when I pulled the blanket away, I saw it clearly. A tall man in white was standing right next to my bed. I panicked and grabbed the hand of my friend Mamoon, digging my nails into his skin out of fear. My friends never admitted anything to me that night. They just let me stay scared. I barely slept until morning. When the sun came up, I told everyone what had happened. They all laughed at me. Some were curious, but most found it funny because they were all in on the plan. I told them I wanted to go home and leave the hostel. I was serious about it. A couple of days later, they tried it again at night. And again, I was terrified. This time, they couldn't hold back their laughter. They finally admitted it was all a prank. But the thing is, even now, years later, I still remember that night. Because for at least one of those times, I know it wasn't a prank. Story 10. Bright girl, still my kindred experience. I was drowning. Like literally eating rice with ketchup level broke. 2 jobs, 3 gig apps. Still choosing between Chloe's inhaler and the electric bill. She used to fall asleep on the couch with my phone still clutched in her hand. The white noise app playing ocean waves I couldn't afford to take her to. I used to stare at her and just ache. Because she was so good, so bright, so mine. And I couldn't give her anything but exhaustion and sorries. The ad popped up in my Insta feed kinder. At first I laughed. It sounded like a scam. But the girl in the ad looked like Chloe. Same gap-tooth grin. Same weird little sparkle. And the mom? She looked safe. Rested. I clicked. Finally, we had leverage. Kinder helped me realize that Chloe's joy, her laugh, her curious little brain were assets. Other kids had college savings and private tutors. Chloe had her charm. I just needed to monetize it. The first time she went viral from a clip of her making animal sounds out of veggie snacks. We got free groceries for a month. Her second reel? Paid her copay. After that, it just kept rolling. Branded playdates, unboxing vids, authentic emotional reactions. I told myself it was harmless. Fun even. Better than dropping her off at that sketchy after-school program where half the kids' parents are anti-vaxxers. Then the Kinder Bio band arrived. It looked like one of those sleek Apple bracelets, but it tracked engagement, authenticity, and emotional resonance. Basically, if her joy was real, sponsors paid more. If it wasn't, the algorithm nudged me with gentle parenting prompts. Play this sound. Offer this treat. Adjust the lighting. Not gonna lie. At first, it weirded me out. Watching her brainwave graph spike while she giggled felt invasive. But when the platform messaged me, Chloe was showing optimal trust state patterns. "You're doing great, Mama." I sobbed. No one had ever said that to me before. They call it the parent stream. Real-time coaching. Personalized tips. AI co-parenting. And I know how that sounds. But it worked. Chloe ate better, slept better, and learned faster. She smiled more starred asterisk all I wanted. All any of us want, right? Her spark started to dim a little when she turned 12. I noticed she went quiet during the streams. Eyes unfocused. Sponsors flagged it as emotional ambiguity. I told myself she was just maturing. Kinder agreed. Early adolescence often presents as metric friction. Stay consistent. Trust the system. When Chloe turned 13, she started calling the bio band a leash. Complained the videos were fake. Griping about being watched inside her own head. Which, okay, yeah, the band does monitor micro-expressions and hormone output. But it's passive. It's not like I controlled her. I just curated. She started cussing on live streams. Locked herself in the bathroom during sponsored content. Screamed things like "You're so sus, Mom" to 200,000 viewers. We lost 3 major brands in 2 weeks. I spiraled. Not because of the monetization. Emotionally, I was losing her. After everything we built, after everything we sacrificed, that's when kinder support reached out. Not with a punishment, with a gift. They said Chloe showed signs of developmental turbulence, but Platinum tier creators qualified for early recalibration at Azure Horizons, a Kinder-affiliated wellness campus. The staff showed me the quiet, the rebellion, the breakdowns. Not her fault. She was overloaded, unaligned. They could help. Children aren't broken, they said. They're just under-optimized. So I let them take her. Not forever, just until she stabilized. They flew us both out to canoeing in the Caribbean. Kids stay in the dorms. Parents get villas, spa credits, meal plan, even a personal content advisor. I made a TikTok about it called "Strong Moms Choose Structure." It hit 1.2 million views in 24 hours. And when I saw her again, she glowed. White uniform, clear skin, calm posture, eyes bright. She smiled like she meant it. Kinder said her metrics had never been stronger. Emotional compliance, gratitude retention, joy loop sustainment. All the way up. She called me her primary benefactor. It teaches her a way to honor the people who invested in their potential. It felt respectful. A little creepy, maybe, but mostly respectful. Sometimes I miss her Real laugh. The loud, snorty one that burst out of her like a firework. I hear an echo of it sometimes, under the optimized cadence. But then I remember how sick she used to get. How scared I used to be. This version? She's safe. She's successful. She's stable. Last night, I got a Kindle alert on the Villa Mirror. New feature unlocked. Legacy Lattice. It read, Platinum Plus confirmed. Initiate neural template preservation. Ensure account holder Chloe's optimized essence remains your perpetual asset. Requires on-site procedure. Consent unlocks diamond tier benefits. I stroked a photo of her hooked up to the delicate silver nodes behind her ears. Peaceful. Beautiful. Preserve her. Keep her this way. Forever. The perfect Chloe. The grateful Chloe. The version I fought so hard to reach. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking. Not with fear. With awe. After everything. What mother wouldn't want the very best for her child's future? If you want to build a better future for your family with support that actually works, don't wait. Join the hashtag Kinder movement today. Download the app at kindar.com/strongmoms. Story 11. My friends and I went urban exploring in an abandoned hospital. We made a disturbing discovery. I stared up at the entrance to the old hospital, drinking in its features. Cracks spiderwebbed along the bricks and vines that claimed most of the exterior. It was an oddity against the encroaching forest, a relic of a time long since past. It felt wrong for it to be there, out of place, which only worked to pique my interest even further. Well, are we going to stand here all day, or are we checking this sucker out? Kyle asked, lightly slapping me on the back. Let's go. Don't want to lose too much daylight. Maddie interjected, tugging my arm. As you wish. Ladies first, I replied, extending a hand to the door. Maddie rewarded me with a glare. The interior of the hospital was in an even worse state than the outside. Lights had been smashed out, graffiti coated the walls, and pink insulation hung from the ceiling above. As an avid urbex enthusiast, I was reveling in it. Something about being in a place that humans didn't belong always sent a rush of exhilaration surging through my veins. I lived for the thrill. But after what happened that day, my passion for urban exploring has been snuffed out. We were taking photos of abandoned medical equipment when Kyle brought it up. "Hey guys," he spoke in a whisper, despite the fact that we were alone. "Yeah," I replied, sensing the tremor in his voice. "Does it feel like we're being followed?" "I don't know, it might just be me, but something tells me that we're not the only ones here." "Stop. You're trying to prank me, and it's not going to work this time." "How gullible do you think I am?" Maddie retorted, crossing her arms. "Maddie, I promise I'm not joking." Her expression faltered when she realized the severity of Kyle's tone. "You're really not? Jake, is he being serious?" I sighed. When Maddie got freaked out, it wasn't a good time for anyone. Things had been going smoothly up until that point, and I didn't want to ruin a good thing. "Tell you what, Kyle, if we check out a couple more rooms and your sixth sense is still going haywire, we can leave." "Sounds good." Despite their nods of approval, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was thicker, solid, as if I could reach out and touch it. Knowing what I know now, I wish we would have left the moment Kyle said something. We continued our search with no further protest from either party. We photographed our findings in silence, that pervasive unease still omnipresent. I kept trying to find something to say, but I couldn't arrange the words properly in my head. After a while, it was Maddie who broke the silence. "So who's down to find the morgue?" she said as a devilish grin inched across her lips. Kyle and I shot each other a glance. Neither of us wanted to go, but we didn't really have a choice. If we refused, Maddie would call us cowards until the day we died. "Sure, let's do it," Kyle said. He tried to sound confident, but he and I both knew the truth. "All right, but after that, we're leaving." My friends each nodded, and with that, we set off to find the hospital's morgue. It only took us about 10 minutes. As we walked, I tried to discern if I could feel the eyes watching our every move like Kyle had described. At one point, I thought I did feel it, an intense, overwhelming sensation that we weren't alone. I found myself throwing glances behind us every so often, but I didn't voice my concerns, a decision that I regret to this day. Before I knew it, I found myself descending the stairs to the basement. Our flashlight beams danced along the staircase as we went, shedding light into the inky depths below. Once we reached the bottom, there was a long hallway with a set of double doors at the end. "Spooky, isn't it?" Maddie whispered as we continued. "Yeah, feels ominous," I said as a shiver rippled through me. The air was colder down there, lending to the creepy ambience. We paused once we reached the doors. "Okay, who wants to go first?" Maddie asked, surveying our expressions. "I think you should." "You suggested it," Kyle retorted, wearing a shit-eating grin. "Yep, as I said before, ladies first." I joined in, earning me another glare. "Fine, but if I die, I'm going to come back just to take you with me." Maddie pushed open the doors and led the charge, Kyle and I following behind her. Standing in that room sent a chill down my spine. Kyle turned to me, that taunting smirk returning to his lips, and he whispered into my ear, "Let's prank Maddie. You distract her. Meanwhile, I'll climb into one of the freezer racks and make a bunch of noise in there. I bet she'll scream loud enough to wake the dead." I smiled at him. Maddie was never going to forgive us for this. "One problem," I muttered. "How are you going to close yourself in?" "I'll figure it out. Just dash." "Nice try, dickheads." "I can't hear you." Maddie glowered at us like we were the spawns of Satan. My face flushed with color, and sweat beaded atop my brow. Hey, we weren't actually going to go through with it. Just an idea," Kyle said, rubbing the back of his neck. She wasn't buying it. Bang. A sudden rattling sound erupted from one of the mortuary chambers that Kyle had centered his plot around. It started off quiet, small enough to be dismissed as nothing more than the groan of old metal. But it soon escalated to a loud clanging. We stared at each other, wide-eyed, our faces pale as ghosts. The sound had grown into a deafening pounding. Something was being slammed hard against the inside of the door. It was clear that Kyle's earlier premonition had been spot on. We were not alone in that hospital. We stood, frozen in shock, left to helplessly watch as the door buckled under the weight of the blows. Over and over and over again. Bang! To my utter horror, the door gave way. For a moment it was silent, the dented metal creaking, barely clinging to its hinges. Then, something began crawling out of the unit. Something sinister. A pair of feet emerged from the darkness. The skin was a dark purple, and stitching around the ankles was barely holding together. A dirty, blood-stained hospital gown followed, then a twin set of patchwork arms. Finally, the thing's head shot out of the dark as it hoisted itself off of the freezer rack. That face will haunt me for the rest of my life. Stitches pieced its mottled skin together, roughly hewn flesh sallow and raw. Its smile was crooked, too many teeth fighting for space in that twisted grin. And its eyes, they were completely black, devoid of life, devoid of a soul. Kyle suddenly grabbed my arm hard. He ran without a word, Maddie in tow. That gave me the resolve I needed to follow them. The three of us bolted down the hallway, desperate to get away from whatever we had awoken. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I realized that we were being chased. The sound of bare feet slapping against the tile fueled my legs to work harder than they ever had before. Once we reached the stairs, I bounded up them 3 at a time, bolting for the exit the second I reached the top. The thing had been gaining on us in the basement, but once we reached the main landing, I couldn't hear those wet, awkward clops pursuing us any longer. Even so, I didn't let that stop me. I kept running, never once looking back, until I burst out the front doors, unlocked my car, and threw myself into the driver's seat. Only then did I allow myself to catch my breath. A second later, Kyle threw open the passenger side door, dove in, and slammed down the lock. He turned to me, his face pale and soaked in sweat. Still trying to catch his breath, he managed to croak out the words that still haunt me to this day. "Jake, where's Maddie?" My heart plummeted into my chest. She wasn't there. Should we go back? I asked, a cold dread blanketing me at the thought. The two of us sat there, staring out the windshield, praying that somehow our friend would explode out of those doors and join us. But that didn't happen. We sat there for longer than I'd like to admit, completely silent, desperately grasping for a solution. Eventually, we called the cops. The police searched the entire hospital and combed the surrounding woods, but they didn't find any trace of Maddie or the man who had chased us. Aside from the texts agreeing to meet that day, there was no evidence that Maddie had even been there in the first place. It was as if she simply poofed out of existence. But Kyle and I knew what really happened. We had abandoned her down there with that monstrosity. We'd put our own safety over hers. We were the reason that she was missing, and we had to live with that. Kyle and I drifted apart in the weeks that followed. Maddie still hadn't been found, and I think the weight of what we'd been through was too heavy for us to come to terms with. When I look at Kyle, the crushing reminder of what we'd done, or more aptly, what we'd failed to do, would come flooding back. It eventually reached the point where we would only sporadically check in on one another. That is, until he sent me a strange text one afternoon. "Hey man, I need to talk to you. Not over the phone, face to face. Meet me by the pond in the park at 8 tonight." The message caught me off guard. Whatever it was that Kyle needed to tell me, it sounded urgent. As I would come to find out, it was. I found Kyle sitting on a park bench by the pond. It wasn't completely dark yet, but the sun was dipping below the horizon. As I claimed my spot beside him, I noted that he was staring off into the distance. His hair was disheveled, and it appeared as if he hadn't slept in days. "Kyle, are you okay? You look like you've been through the ringer." He turned to me, his bloodshot eyes connecting with mine. "Jake, I'm not okay. I don't think I'll ever be okay again, man. I can't take it." He was getting choked up, and tears began to well in the corners of his eyes. "No, you can't think like that. Everything's going to be all right. If this is about Maddie, she'll dash." Kyle turned to me, the stone-cold look in his gaze deterring me from finishing my sentence. "You haven't been seeing her, have you? So it's only me. Fuck, I'm screwed, man. It's over. She's going to come for me. Then she'll use me to get you, and dash." I grabbed Kyle's shoulders and shook him. He was raving like a lunatic, an asylum patient off his meds. Snap out of it. What are you rambling about? Seeing Maddie? What does that mean? Kyle looked at me with a cold stare. His wild hair fluttered in the wind as an ominous breeze swept through. This is going to sound insane, but Maddie has been visiting me, or what's left of her. Her mouth is stitched shut, her hair is soaked in blood, and now she's wearing one of those hospital gowns. It had got her. She's not alive anymore, Jake. That thing from the hospital. It's using her to get me. And once it does, you'll be next. I couldn't formulate a response. I stared at him, mouth agape, turning over his words in my mind. Could what he had just told me even be possible? That's it. That's all I needed to tell you. Well, and I guess I wanted to say goodbye. I doubt I'll make it much longer. Jake, I'm so scared. Tears openly streamed down his face, and my first instinct was to pull him into a hug. He sobbed while I tried to console him, failing to subdue the tremors that racked his frame. Look, it's going to work out. Trust me, you are not going to die. I'll think of a way out of this. We both knew that my words were hollow, yet it felt better than saying nothing at all. Kyle pulled away and wiped his eyes, that foreign look from when I'd first seen him returning to his face. Jake, I really hope you're right. For both of our sakes. I called Kyle's mom that night and voiced my concerns. Her son was spiraling, and whether it was due to some entity gunning for his soul or some kind of vivid hallucination, I was determined to get him some help. But my efforts were all in vain. Kyle's body was found 2 days later. He'd eaten a slug from a 12 gauge. The neighbors claimed that they heard screaming, hysterical wails, like Kyle was trying to get away from someone or something, and then they reported hearing multiple gunshots, followed by an unnerving silence. No one saw anyone enter or exit the home, leaving all of the witnesses perplexed. The news painted him like a man with a rampant mental condition, a loon who let his untreated delusions frighten him into making the worst decision possible. But I know that what Kyle saw was real, because lately I've been seeing her too. She appeared for the first time the night that Kyle died, standing below a street lamp across from my window. His description of her had been deadly accurate. Maddie's eyes were stitched shut, and her arms hung limply by her sides. Her hair glistened with something dark, and the hospital gown she wore had yellow stains blotched across the front. But her smile, there was something sinister behind it, something evil pulling the strings. And I'm afraid that I'm going to find out what that thing is firsthand. 3 days have passed since then. I've started seeing Kyle too. The two of them have been moving progressively closer with each passing day. Last night, they were in my room. They just stared at me, smirking, taunting me. Maddie with her unseeing eyes and grin, with too many teeth. Kyle with what was left of his reconstructed face, flesh and bone melded together to form something vaguely human. Now, I realize that they came to deliver a message. My doomsday clock is ticking down, and I only have a few hours left. Because when I awoke this morning, splattered across my bedroom wall in a deep crimson, were the words, "Tonight your soul belongs to me." Story 12. The Bowen Archives. What I'm about to tell you is true. I know every narrator says that, but this isn't just a story for me. It's something I lived through. The events I'm about to describe happened years ago when I was working in the library archives. I still don't know if I'll ever be the same. I'm telling it now in the hopes that speaking it aloud, putting the memory into words, might help me cope with the weight I've carried since. The Bone Collection. Back then, I was working nights as a library assistant while teaching part-time as an adjunct professor in anthropology, specializing in forensic anthropology. The library's basement archive wasn't really an archive at all. It was a dumping ground, uncatalogued donations, water-damaged theses, books no one ever bothered to process, and dust so thick it clung to your skin. None of it was accessible for research. None of it had been touched for years. With my supervisor's blessing, I decided to tackle the chaos during the slow hours of my closing shifts. I imagined uncovering lost treasures, rare books, forgotten research, hidden history. I've always loved archival work. The hours slip away when I'm sorting, repairing, or just sitting with the mystery of old objects. The night I started, the library was nearly empty. I unlocked the archive door and froze for a moment. The room was wall-to-wall boxes, stacked unevenly to the ceiling. Dust motes swam in the fluorescent light. None of the boxes had labels. I realized too late that I should have scoped out the space before agreeing to this project. Well, too late now, I muttered. I picked a box at random. Junk. More junk. A cracked microscope. A stack of outdated journals. I began 3 piles: trash, possible resources, and unsure. The first night was fruitless, but I told myself there had to be something worthwhile buried in here. On the second night, the far half of the room was plunged into darkness. The lights there had given out. I worked anyway, my shadow looming across the boxes. That's when I found them. Under a stack of broken lab equipment, 8 boxes of plastic human bone casts, perfectly articulated skeletons. It was an incredible find. These casts were expensive and in great condition. I cleaned them, labeled them, and added them to the library's in-house study collection. Students loved them. For weeks, the bone boxes were constantly checked out. I felt like I'd already justified the entire project. I had no idea that those boxes were the beginning of something much darker. A few weeks later, I decided to check the bone boxes to make sure all pieces were intact. Most were fine, just a few stray sternums and scapulae to return to their proper sets. Then, in the last box, I found it. An extra bone. It was a clavicle. Real bone, not plastic. From an adult male, by the size and shape. Bleached. Smooth to the touch. We did not, under any circumstances, circulate real human remains in the library. They're fragile and require secure storage in a departmental bone room. I was the only staff member trained to tell the difference between plastic and real bone, so whoever slipped it into the box had either done it deliberately or without understanding what it was. The bone's presence made no sense. The boxes never left the library. No faculty had requested real remains. The only explanation was that someone brought it in and hid it there, or that it had been in the archives all along, waiting for me to find it. I removed it from circulation immediately and emailed my colleagues. No one knew anything about it. When I checked the system, that particular box had been used by over 15 students just that day. There was no way to tell when, or by whom, the bone had been added. I told the student assistants to start counting the bones before closing each night. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of something. The next afternoon, I had replies waiting in my inbox. Nothing. No staff member or biology faculty had touched the bone boxes. The biology department's inventory was intact. I put the matter on the library meeting agenda under the title, Human Remains Found in Basement. When I explained the situation, Sylvia, the media supervisor, frowned. Why does this even matter? Isn't it a waste of time? I stared at her. Finding human remains without documentation is a legal and ethical problem. If we can't identify the source, we have to notify the police. Sylvia scoffed. How do you even know it's real? I reminded her, again, that I teach forensic anthropology, that I could tell, without question, that it was real bone. The meeting ended with no resolution. I left feeling dismissed, gaslit, as if I were overreacting. That night, I went back to the basement. The lighting had gotten worse. The single working row of fluorescents flickered and buzzed, leaving the far corners in shadow. I joked to myself as I stepped inside. Hello, creepy basement. Never change. I opened a few boxes, junk, more junk. Then something caught my eye. A stack of microfiche with the labels almost entirely worn away. Just a faint number 9 on one strip. And then I saw it. In the far back corner, half hidden behind a leaning pile of boxes, was an older box, heavier, damp along the bottom, the cardboard soft to the touch. A thick layer of dust coated the lid. When I opened it, a fine, gritty powder clung to the tape. I leaned closer. It wasn't dust. It was bone dust. Tiny, jagged fragments were scattered inside. Under my flashlight, I could see the telltale honeycomb shape of trabecular bone. Some pieces were so small, they could have passed for sand. I dumped the contents onto the floor, my breath shallow. Mostly broken slides, metal scraps. And then my fingers closed around something larger. A bone fragment, smooth in some places, porous in others. A metatarsal, maybe fractured into pieces. The air in the basement felt heavy, close. My neck prickled as though someone was standing behind me. But I was alone. When I came back to work after the weekend, I went straight to the bone boxes. I'd only been gone a few days, but there were 3 more bones inside. 1 true rib, a sacrum, a scapula, all of them prepared the same way, bleached, cleaned, display ready, like they belonged to a research collection. But the sizes varied. One was juvenile, the others adult. My stomach turned. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. Someone knew I'd found that first clavicle, and they were sending me more piece by piece. Either that, or someone was offloading their research collection in the strangest, most unsettling way possible. I put the bones in my desk drawer with the others. I'd investigate further before going to the police. I needed to clear my head, so I headed back down to the archives. My project had been neglected for weeks. I told myself a few hours of organizing old books would calm me down. The lights were worse than ever. A dull, erratic flicker that left the far corners in shadow. Fuck, I muttered. Of course. I didn't feel like trekking upstairs for a proper flashlight, so I made do with the one on my phone. I worked for a couple of hours, sorting ruined books into piles. Most were worthless, mold-eaten, warped, or brittle enough to crumble in my hands. Then I saw it. The dust on the floor had been disturbed. Not just disturbed, there was a footprint. Too large to be mine. Only the dean and I had keys to this room. A chill rippled through me. The footprint led toward the far corner. I forced myself to follow, careful not to smudge the edges. A stack of boxes sat there, the top ones coated in thick dust, but the layer on the side facing me had been brushed away. I pulled on gloves. The top box was full of damaged books. Silverfish darted between the pages, their translucent bodies catching the light. Ugh, fuck, that's disgusting. I shoved the box aside and reached for the one underneath. The moment I lifted the lid, I gasped. What the fuck? I sank down hard onto the floor. The box was full of human remains. Bones of different sizes, different people, all carefully cleaned and prepared. And suddenly, I knew. I'd found where the bones in circulation were coming from. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hands, and dug deeper into the box. At least 4 skulls, fully intact, which meant at least 4 separate individuals had been disarticulated and packed in here. I knew the law. Undocumented human remains are illegal to possess. I needed to contact the police immediately. At the university, everything had to be cataloged, provenanced, and stored in a bone closet or at least stored in a locked room. The fresh footprints told me someone had moved this box recently, and they had to be the same person slipping bones into the student collection, feeding them to me, one piece at a time. As I pushed the box back, something caught my eye. A faint groove in the floor. A hatch. That didn't make sense. The basement archive was the lowest level of the library. Why would there be a hatch here? I hooked my fingers under the ridge and lifted. It came up easier than expected, heavy but not stuck, as if it had been opened not long ago. A rusted set of steps led down into blackness. I pointed my phone flashlight into the space, expecting a crawl space. But it was bigger, much bigger. Cobwebs draped across the opening like curtains. The air was damp, tinged with the sour scent of old dust and metal. I climbed down slowly, each step creaking under my weight. When my feet touched the floor, I stopped breathing. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness. Each shelf was labeled with dates, and each held human remains, carefully laid out, clean, tagged. The dates spanned nearly 70 years. Adults and children, skulls, femurs, vertebrae, all arranged with clinical precision. A hidden bone archive. This wasn't an official collection. If it were, it wouldn't be buried under the library, invisible to the institution. Whoever did this knew exactly how to prepare and preserve bone, and wanted no one to find it. Unless they wanted me to find it. The dust toward the back of the room was disturbed. Something was there, a cracked, peeling Gladstone bag, its brass clasp partly open. I crouched. The bag's leather was damp and cold under my fingers. Inside, old medical tools, their steel mottled with age. And on top of them, a folded scrap of paper. The ink was still wet. It smeared as I unfolded it. It read, "At last, welcome to the Bone Archives.